Just some SVG files almost cost me 40,000 rupees. I'm not joking. Hey everyone, so I'm an Android developer and this story is related to Android development. But the lesson is for anyone who writes code, because this kind of disaster can happen to anyone. And trust me, this was probably the worst coding experience I've ever had. So I was working on my Android project in Android Studio. If you have never used Android Studio before, it's a pretty heavy software. It loves using RAM. We write our code on one side and the Android Studio shows a preview on the other side. So we can see what the app will look like. Everything was normal. Then I added some SVG files to the project. I wanted to display those SVG files in the UI. Simple task, right? Well, not really. The preview wasn't rendering. Android Studio kept showing an error. Basically, it couldn't find or render the SVG correctly. So I thought, okay, maybe a refresh will fix it. So I refreshed the preview, same error. Refreshed again, same error again. I refreshed it over and over again. Still the same error. At this point, I was getting annoyed. So I started trying random things. I deleted those SVG files, added it again by different names. Still the exact same problem. Then I did what every desperate Android developer does. Clean project, rebuild project, invalidate caches, restart Android Studio, the whole package. Still nothing. Then things started getting weird. Android Studio was showing a CRC error. At first, I didn't think too much about it. Big mistake. Because a few minutes later, the problem stopped looking like an Android Studio bug. Windows started freezing. Now I was worried, because this wasn't just Android Studio anymore. Something else was going wrong. The laptop became unresponsive. I waited for a time, but nothing was working. Eventually, I had to force restart the computer. And that's where the real nightmare started. After restarting, Android Studio couldn't open the project. My project was completely missing from the recent project list. It was just gone. I was confused. I knew the project existed. I had been working on it just a few minutes earlier. So I opened File Explorer and then I noticed something strange. My D drive was there, but Windows wasn't showing the storage information anymore. No use space, no free space, just the drive name. I clicked on it. Windows asked me to format the drive, and that's when the real tension started, because my Android project was on that drive. Months of work, code, assets, experiments, everything was there. So I decided to wait. I let the laptop rest for more than 10 hours. I was thinking maybe it was a temporary issue, maybe heat had caused something weird, maybe Windows was confused, maybe another restart would fix it, maybe anything. But no, the drive still wasn't working. So I went to the computer repair shop. I explained the whole situation. The technician checked it and told me something I really didn't want to hear. He said, your SSD is corrupted. Data recovery might be possible. It could cost around 40,000 rupees. 40,000 rupees. For a second, I was thinking, bro, the recovery cost is more than the actual cost of SSD. So I came back home and tried everything I safely could. I spent around 8 hours running recovery scans and checks, watching progress bars, reading error messages, hoping for good news. After 8 hours, nothing. No miracle, no happy ending, just more confirmation that the D drive was corrupted. Eventually, I had to accept reality. The only practical option left was to format the drive. And honestly, that was one of the hardest clicks I've ever made as a developer. Because once you press format, you are accepting that whatever is left there is probably gone. But there was one thing working in my favor. GitHub, the savior. I had already pushed my project to the GitHub. Not every change, not the latest experiments, but the important code was there. The project wasn't completely lost. I could clone it, I could continue development, I could keep building, and suddenly the situation felt different. GitHub didn't just save my code, it saved me from 40,000 recovery bill. Think about that. A GitHub push takes a few seconds. GitHub is free, and it potentially saved tens of thousands of rupees. That's insane. So, if you are a student or anyone who writes code, please use version control, GitHub, or anything similar. Just don't keep your only copy on single drive, because everything feels fine until one day it isn't. And when that day comes, you will either have a backup or you will have very expensive lesson. Thankfully, mine ended with GitHub, and that's why after this experience, I have one rule: commit, push, sleep peacefully. And thanks for watching.